Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. Always support your teammates by upholding the process, procedure, and values of the Guardian culture. Defend the D in Guardian. Our guest today, founder of Guardian Roofing and Siding, friend of the Culture Matters podcast, teacher of values, steward of values in Guardian Roofing and Siding. Robert Frehafer is back to talk about defend, how to live out this value, some ways, as Abraham Lincoln said, I learn from everyone I meet. Usually it's what not to do, how not to live out the value. Robert started his company almost 2 decades ago. And having more than, that tenure served in his industry, has learned and experienced the round robin of scenarios of good and evil of how to do his business, and is a great mentor and steward of conscience in his industry. If you're familiar with roofing, um, um, storm restoration, don't pay very close attention to this episode, because you're going to learn a few things, I believe. If you're not familiar, you may be interested in getting more familiar. Robert, thanks for coming on.
Jay, good morning. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks again for another heartfelt introduction. It's always nice to hear these nice things that you say. It's a great way to get started for me, and I appreciate it. It holds me to a high standard, and I'm glad to hear that you see me in that light. So thank you for that very nice introduction. I do want to just throw a clarity out there, right? With you saying like, hey, he's been in business for, almost 20 years, or has had his business for 20 years. That is an accurate statement. But we've really only been in this industry of storm restoration since 2009. And when I started, I was working alongside another contractor. He was the owner of the business. That's really what the invitation to it. So, but over, whatever it is, 13 years or so, working as Guardian, which, it was really nice to see some things. I was cleaning out some drawers. I'm trying to move from paper to electronic, everything, electronic from that standpoint. And I was just pulling out old files because they really don't get used. And one of the things was a certificate that we got from the Better Business Bureau for a decade. And there's two sides to that. One might say, oh, well, it's the Better Business Bureau, whatever. Like you pay them $500 a year and you're listed there, and that's that. But for me, it was, I don't know. I guess growing up, I held some regard to the Better Business Bureau, right? Like they did a great job with their marketing. They sold me. And so to have that and see that, it was in alignment with what you're talking about. Like, all right, this time I've put time in. And for me, it really hit me like, wow, this could go on. And I think we talked about this a week ago or so, just like, this is how companies get in business for 70, 100, 200 years by, one day at a time, 1 year, 1 decade. But just something with that decade, it really touched me. So, but anyway, thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate it.
Do you think you're, I guess, what's the difference between Robert 10 years, in that 10 to 20 year period versus Robert in that 1 to 5 year period? Because the listeners, they may be in that 1 to 5 year or that 5 to 10, wishing that they get to that 10 to 20 year period of being a business owner.
Are we doing the full day podcast today?
No.
The 10 hour span podcast.
Try to answer it briefly before we go to the value. Yeah, yeah.
What's the
Just my
difference between year one
curiosity's
and
gonna
five to year 10? So,
have overtaken me.
number one, I think that the biggest thing that raises out as a difference is an impactful difference is some level, and I say it carefully, some level of self-awareness. Who I am, how I interact with people, what my weaknesses are, what my insecurities are, how my myself wants to um avoid conflicts and keep things nice and feel good and control situations, and all these pros and cons of myself versus the unawareness. And I think that back then it was just drive based on a limited worldview, and after and in a lot of insecurity, and that insecurity drove movement. It made creation, like, to continue to move forward, and man, I could go on and on and on, so many things, but that really awareness, um and you gave such a great introduction that I think it would only be fair, and I realize it's your show and you're interviewing me, but for the listener that's listening, that I'm when I share this, because that's what I've been finding I'm doing a lot lately, is sending out the podcast that you record to other people individually, so everybody knows you've been, it's hard for me to say the number one impactor, but I think reasonably the number one impactor of my life for those awarenesses that I'm talking about right now, those self awarenesses. I think there was a foundation built through family, life experience, 12-step programs, biblical teachings. All these things were foundational, but it was just like working with you. I say it like you were able to hold a mirror up so I could see who I am and what I'm doing. And you brought your knowledge of culture, right, which is top down, meaning from me as the leader, and that's going to impact the culture of the business or the society or whatever is going on, right, from a culture standpoint, whatever medium it is, or grouping. And you have been so impactful through the way that we have communicated, and the things that you've taught me, and we've worked together on. So as an introduction to you, this man is he's a well-studied, amazing, reader, Jay. That's what you are. I look at you as a student of business, life, culture, psychology, yourself. You're vulnerable. You're willing to share your own downfalls. You are you are, and this is what's really interesting to me. I think that you do the best you can to be humanly possible, authentic, vulnerable, honest, and virtuous. And the one thing that really stood out to me with what you do is that, and especially with, I'm such a strong, motivated person by faith. A lot of me comes from what's been taught, and the gift that's given of faith in God. So that drives me. It's where a lot of my conscience comes from. In our meetings over a half of a decade ish now, you've revealed in the very beginning, like, no, it's, there might be a God. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I'm doing this because this is the virtuous thing to do. I want to live this way and do these things. And it was very odd to me. It was curious, right? Well, where is this coming from? How is this? I had my own preconceived notions, truly, that eventually you're going to believe, and that's God still working through you. But that is a limited belief, truly, because I'd like to remain open and trust what you say. So, all that being said, from a man of faith, I consider myself that, to be so impacted by someone that at that time was not a faithful man. And I say that way because of, I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but some of the things that you've said are transitional at this point. And I'm not claiming that you're turning around and saying, yep, that's it, I believe in God and I'm turning my life over, this and that. But you've you've changed from, and correct me if I'm wrong, from atheist to more than agnostic, a little more than agnostic, like that there might be, open-minded, that there may be a God, which is a big statement and step. And that being said, and I
Thanks.
want you to interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong on that statement.
Uh, It's too nuanced to say yes or no.
Fair enough. And I was going to interrupt and try to like save defend. But thank you for that. So all that being said, you've impacted my life so much. And as you're doing this introduction to me, that thought was going through like, man, I'd love to tell people who this guy is for me, right? Like, because of how studied
Thanks.
you are, the people that you've met, the understanding, the continued education that you spend your time, your resources, and your discipline in life and your goals laid out. Like, you have so impacted my life that for such a better. So, the number one difference, I say that self-awareness, but let's say working with a coach, right? Working with a advisor, and then you've made such a great impact. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, well, I've had the blessing of being able to learn with you and have these um, thoughtful conversations with that, deep conversations and grow. I think your piety, uh, because you actually live your beliefs that you talk about, like they're real to you. That has influenced my family in a positive way, me included. And I think that in itself, it's really beautiful and definitely to definitely leaning more on the side of I'd rather believe than not in my own walk of the metaphysical. Um, and I would definitely put you in a high camp of the protagonists in my life that exemplify their faith in a way that would be attractive to me, to others. So yeah, I want to give you a lot of or uh, acknowledge you, you know, um, for that. And I think that yeah, no, I appreciate it. It it's in my experience, and maybe this is something that the audience hope helps them. I've had an easier time working with people that have something that they deeply believe, like God, for example. Um, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean I get the most from leaning into those relationships. And I don't want to say I learn the most from those that are the least believing, but I do get the most on the other side of the conflict. Um, so where I'm trying to say that is it's been a great joy to work with believers and a great pain to work with non-believers. And I likely learn as much from either. I don't want to put either on, but I'd rather not work with non-believers, but that's why I must. And I'm a non-believer. Like, so if I'm going to be literal about it, like I haven't, you know, run around and into the village and yelled like, that's it. I'm not, so I'm in purgatory in a sense there psychologically. So I'm in between these two paradigms. And, just that's been an interesting experience. It's all just like a reflection of my own battle, is what I think. Everyone that's in my life I've been given credit for being helpful in capacities that I've been helpful in, and yeah, okay, I'll accept that. I don't think it's healthy to accept it too deeply, because ultimately, why am I as helpful as I am? I think has there's what I've done, and then it makes me think of, well, why do I do what I do, or why am I compelled to do what I do? And I can't take credit for that all totally, because I'm just the way I am. It seems like it would be if I accepted too deeply, too righteously your testimony of me, then it would be just self righteous. And so, like, maybe a way that I don't let that get to my head is that, I would say, well, God help me, right? Help you. And if I just say, well, the universe, something like that, it's probably just some solipsistic, like, I'm God thing. And I don't believe I'm God. So I'm kind of, stuck in thought around these whole things. And that doesn't really get me anywhere. But I can say that I do enjoy working with you. And I think part of that has to do with you actually believe what you believe. Um, Even if, like me, my actions can contradict my beliefs. Um, it's like a feeling. It's like culture. We know when the culture is right. We know when it's wrong. We just know, even if we can't speak it. That's what it's like being around you and your faith. And I think that impacts people. It impacted me. Um, and those that don't, the lesser part of me wants to steer away from them, but who I really am wants to come closer to them. And I always learn a lot about myself and the world and them, leaning into that them, and I am them, right? Undecided. So, and I think it's important to be aware of that. There's another thing too. Dang, it's like yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll come back to me. Um, I can't remember. I think your example in your belief of your faith is a very strong case study for people listening that want to be that want that desire to attract. I know what I was going to say, to attract people to their business, to what they're stewarding. It's like you got to be all in. We have to be all in on what we are just are. We have to just be all in, whatever it is. So I think you've been all in on your faith to the point that it challenges, shocks people that aren't, so that would pull and push and create like friction. People that aren't, that would be called to you, and then the people that aren't, that would be repelled. And then it's like, well, who are you relative to those two camps? How do you relate to both? You know, so the same thing is like a business owner. I look at it like a business owner with their idea. Because in business, right, it's all about what the business owner is about. Their idea. It's all about them, even if they don't think it is. It is, or it is about them. But you got to be all in on the business. And a lot of people listening might not be all in on their business. You've been all in on your faith. I know what I was going to say earlier. You mentioned this thing about this interesting observation that you've had of me, and you're not the first to say. A lot of people have said this. Uh, uh, these desires to be good and or pursuing righteousness in the absence of what in the absence of faith. But that's because I've lived in hell. Like, so I'm just trying to figure it all out myself. And I'm pretty shifty. Like, so I can, yeah, but that's because I've failed so deeply at being a sinner. Like, I'm not a good criminal type person. It's just not. And I think deeply, I was raised really well. Like all the if I think about my life, I was given a chance. I may have rebelled in the beginning against the chance, but I, if I look at how I was raised and what the environment around me, it was a lot of good, not evil. So I think good is part of was part of the recipe. So it's about I've been finding my way to good. So that makes me think it's not surprising that I had these. So, but then I don't see how healthy it is for me or anybody in a position where they're getting testimony as strong as you're giving. I don't. I said just take all the credit. You know, that's where it's like, it's got to be more than just. And that brings me to the God, right? Where one I would want to say, hey, it would be me and right because in the absence of me and being giving credit to the things beyond my awareness, beyond my control, beyond my intellect, beyond my learnings. Um, Giving awareness to that is like an act of humility, is how I look at it. But if I took all of the testimony, it's like, yes, it's all of me. That might be partially right. Um, it seemed a bit overdone though, like egocentric. So that's kind of where I fall right now in that. Um, but that trying to do things right. It's funny trying to do things right through the medium of business. You know, there's a level of a big level of contradiction in that because business is just it's a contradicting medium because I thought of this the other day. I think culture really is review. It starts with how we work with our customers because our employees see how we behave with our customers, and then they model that. They model that. In the last half decade plus, I've spent a lot of time around companies and a lot of time around companies that are talking about culture. It's like, and then I thought of this because someone said the other day, motivation doesn't last. Well, because maybe motivation is tied to the word, but inspiration is tied to the actions, like the spirit. If I'm telling you what you should be doing versus you see me, like we go out together, we knock doors. So I tell you, and everybody listen to this, when you sell, you have to sell from the heart. Listen, ask questions. But then you and me go out in the field, and the first person answers the door and says, "Get the hell off my property." And I say, "Get the hell off, what the earth," right? So that's not very loving or inquiring. Someone says, "Get the hell off my property." I'd love to. Do you have a moment? You know, and mean it, not like angrily. And if they say, "No, I don't have any moments," you could leave or maybe think of something else clever to say and not be a jerk, but be fun or love it. So, or just leave, thank them and go to the next one. But seeing that interaction versus like just being told it, two different worlds. Yeah, they can synthesize, but so I think the culture starts with how we work with the customers, because it's an act of service that humbles the egocentricity of the business. Because what's the business about? The business is about a lot of things. I mean, Drucker would say it's about creating a customer. You know, someone that starts a business, of course, it's about them at a level, like them eating, them drinking, the base needs, providing for the family. Less base, more aesthetic needs, being seen as significant, being given credit for their competencies, for their craft, competing with their peers, whoever that may be. I mean, there's going to be a level of self-centeredness in the inception of something new, because it's starting from a self in the center. Like, and it's not just language. It started with somebody or some people saying, let's do this. And as there's more people in the company, we're worried about our employees, right? But so where I'm going with this is companies talking about culture and being so focused on their employees and satisfying their needs. If they forget about the customer, it's like it happens as a result of interacting with the customer. The employees see it. If it's too much reacting to the employees, I think it starts to kind of invert and break down, where it becomes like marketing, trying to convince everybody we're great versus being great.
Mm.
And in an analogy, like a cult versus a culture would be, I think, simply that binary of culture is focused on the customers, the employees learn by watching, and the cult atmosphere is like we have to convince everything's perfect all the time, and we're great, and you're great, and it's great, and things are great, and we're not able to have the real conversations with our customer, with each other. And in our culture today on the corporate side, I think there's an overemphasis on that. Inverted, like looking at ourselves with the culture versus and over talking about it versus living out the values with the customers and living them out with ourselves. And all that comes to mind when you share your testimony about the business work that we've been going through that's led to, I mean, whatever you think it's led to, I'll rather you share that. And I'm on the other side saying, hey, as a person, on the culture of individualism, familial alignment, cultural alignment, you're like, how I'm relating to our society and then the world, your character, your faith, a part of your culture has impacted me and other people because you believe and you live it. You're all in on your faith. So the lesson in business is, I believe we have to be all in on our business. If we're all in our business and not all in our faith, maybe that's a really bad story that we've all read. If we're all in on our faith and we're not all in our business, well, then our business is our faith. You know, if we're all in on our business and we're all in on our faith, well, then maybe that's what I've been trying to say for years, ironically, not a believer, because I've been trying to, I know I'm why I believe that I've been trying to put myself together as I build the company, like as a person. And so, in a big sense, I think you're correct that I've been, finding, uh, coming closer to faith in different ways through the work. Um, this might be overly simplistic, but I've seen, I've been now in a lot of different, I've been in plenty of places. I think like there's two types of business owners. There's those that have the ability to get away with the things that there's those that have the ability to get away with and don't. And there's those that have the ability to get away with and do. Because power creates the ability to get away with, insert dot dot dot. So what's the governor? Like, what's the accountability on that? You would say God. Like, if somebody listening to this is in a position of power where they can get away with just about anything, and they don't have to suffer the consequences because they have power, they have resources, they have admirers, like all that matters. Well, who's going to stop you from doing thing whatever you want? Well, it's going to be you, but then it's like, well, can you? And then it's, well, maybe you can't without what you would say God, because the person that thinks somebody's looking over their shoulder, like somebody all knowing and all seeing, might not do that. It's the person that thinks nobody's watching, nobody gives a shit, it all doesn't matter, and doesn't suffer the consequences. They're just going to do things that are eventually going to undermine them. So, like, that's the binary that I'm caught in right now, as far as trying to learn about myself and the world and the greater eternal, all that, through working with businesses. There are real life consequences to business owners when they don't take the time to think about their actions and the consequences from like a bigger sense than just, because I was insert, because business owners are constantly thinking about their actions and consequences, but there's levels to thinking about one's consequences and actions. um Next time, I think it'll be fun to talk about defend. But I'm glad that we talked about this. I think it's a, I appreciate the opportunity. Maybe there's, it's definitely helped me to talk about it, and I would hope that others could get something. What do you, what in closing, what do you think is the takeaway?
Well, a couple of things. You know, you talked about the all in, you talked about, the potential with the compliment and the testimony of my experience with you. Your response is that, okay, you could take it all, you could make yourself prideful, take all the credit for all of those things. Or you've seen others that where you're considering, like, all right, there could be some credit shared with God. That part that part really resonated with me. My own personal experience with that is that I think that I was actually, I don't know if that thought was the right one. What I was going to say, just for clarity, is that I think that I was actually too far one way in my humility. But I don't want to say that I think I was, because it's just where I was, and that was part of getting me to where I am, which who knows where the future will hold in growth. But with that being said, you know, drove hard, did a lot of things, worked hard and did stuff. And many people were like, oh man, good job. You've done a great job. And I was always so quick to deflect and say, I thank God, God, thank God, I give God the credit for this. Now, in like a Christian circles, that's like, ever heard this term, like Christianese, right? Like a language that's used, like all the glory to God, right? To God be all the glory. These are like reasonable things in biblical worldviews but I think what my experience is that to someone outside of the culture, when you say that, especially for me, people that were not believers would turn right back at me. Those that were like really into the relationship, I would say, I believe they would say, no, you've done this. You're the one that got clean. You're the one that worked. You're the one that sacrificed. You did this. And I would argue, based off of the fact that I only did this because God motivated me to do this. He made me who I am. He gave me the conviction inside to make a change. He gave me the strength to make those changes, the personality who I am. So I would argue that back and forth. Not until maybe, I don't know how long ago, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, time becomes a blur sometimes with work on this property. But it was the silliest little thing. I was like using the skid steer and moving logs around and this and that. My neighbor and other believers, like, they were like, "Hey, you're really good at driving that machine." And somehow something clicked in my mind that that just resonated with me, that, and it's in alignment with what you're saying, is that I have responsibility here. I am given choices. I have free will. So, yes, all the glory goes to God. Oh, He's the creator of it all. He puts it all together. He does everything. He makes me who I am. He knows what I'm going to do and all that. But I still think He makes me to be able to make a choice, because I make bad choices too, and I suffer those consequences. So I think that I can, at this point where I'm at, is that I'm pretty comfortable to say thank you. You're really good at that. Thank you very much. Just that simple thing. The other side of it, the earlier me was revealing, truly, I believe in hindsight, my insecurity with myself, my inability to accept a compliment from somebody. And I felt unworthy potentially. And I have to be cautious because I want to remain humble. And I do want to give all the glory to God, but I can do that and still be a confident, you know, child of God, right? Like, and give him, I can give him the credit. I could give him the credit for that. But at the same time, I can accept that, compliment, so to speak. So that insecurity that comes up, for me, when someone says, "Oh, you've done this great job," I don't even know where that comes from, right? Like, I grew up, I had, people would give me compliments and stuff like that. And, but there's just, I think it's probably, if I had to self-diagnose, probably some of the shameful things that I've done, the things that I'm not proud of, are still swirling. And I may not have forgiven myself or accepted God's forgiveness for those and just held it. But I think just like shedding some of those things and not continuing to act out on those things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I still fall and stumble. But all that being said, and then accepting that forgiveness and moving on, and then seeing it from the outside. I think this is part of what we worked on. I can see and listen to people so much more. So when I see somebody that I'm interpreting based off of my worldview, my paradigm, the way I'm judging it, that they're doing that same thing, like, "Oh no, like, not taking any credit for this, da 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 da," like, I have compassion for them, actually, like, "Oh, man," like, because it's heavy. That's a heavy thing to try to deflect that. It's uncomfortable, and then it actually it negates the compliment from your counterpart. So the person that's saying, "Hey, this is really nice. You did a good job on this. Hey, thanks so much," right? That's really hearing them, responding back to them, and letting them know, like, you appreciate their noticing of you, versus it's almost like, for me, it's like I negating that compliment, like, "Nah, I don't deserve that. You don't take that back. Let's give God all the glory." But again, there's a balance there, right? Depending on the relationship, the time, proximity to the people, there, I often still do that. I always say, "Thank you so much." I really, I wouldn't be able to do these things without God, like business wise or this and that, like, because I really believe that He brings the people together. He does these things. So I say all that because I think your psychological analysis or cultural analysis, that, an individual that says, "Yes, I've done this," I think that would be the end result, and they could then put themselves into this, you know, um, prideful lack of humility, and which ultimately I believe would more than likely end up shattered at some capacity down the line, if that wanes. Um, but it's just really interesting to me that the view from a cultural standpoint, or psychological standpoint, that someone can fall into is that, and I believe it. I believe it through what I see today. You touched on it briefly, like, well, if I said it was me or the universe, then that would be, that would be basically the end result of that is that the individual is lifted up themselves as God, basically, because they control what these things go up by sending vibrations out and speaking things into existence. There's these like little tweaks in there, little verbal.
Which, by the way, is extremely helpful ideology for a startup.
Well, yeah, you have to, yes, you have to
Just
do
think
it. You
about
have
like
to.
the startup culture.
Well, but so here's where
Starting.
I was going to bring into that the part where it says, oh, like there's this concept of speaking it into the universe, and the universe hears the vibrations and gives you what you say. You got to think it, believe it, and say it. Well, that as a standalone is blasphemous, truly, from my view. That's blasphemy. That's your own self. You're controlling, you're doing it, and God's creation, the universe, is going to give it back to you. But there a small tweak to that is that consider the things, pray to God, ask for these things. If it's in his will, he will give it to you. That's biblical, right? It's written that way. Like, pray for these things, and pray as in faith that you're already going to receive them. But without the honoring of our creator, and without the and truly without the relationship through Jesus Christ, his son, it's all it's truly
See, I have the belief that there's a connection between vengefulness psychologically, so a closed mind, a hardened heart, and the former, the person that's calling out to the universe, believing that they're going to manifest what they do. I think there's a connection with vengefulness, a closed mind, and a hardened heart. On the other side of that, the latter, praying to God, and all those behaviors, I think there's a connection with the forgiveness and an open mind and a pure heart. So there's a distinction between the two types of individuals. Now, someone can, in the latter camp, praying to God, they can still have a closed mind and a hardened heart. That, like, I guess, but there will be a truth in their behavior. Like, there will be. I might not be able to see it. Nobody might be able to see it. They may not be able to see it, but I do think there's a connection or a distinction there. It's like the yeah. That's you're gonna say something.
I know we do need I know that you want to wrap up, and
I wrote this down too. Maybe I should share this with like the four
before you
levels.
share it, I want to just touch on this real quickly, the topic about this, speaking out to the universe, self-creation, it comes back to you. Truly, my take on that is that from a biblical standpoint, this world is under a spiritual forces unseen, from a demonic nature, from from the devil that wants to kill, steal, and destroy from God and God's creation. But through that, and in alignment with what you're saying, with this vengeful heart, this closed minded, doing these things, that's the enemy's stomping ground, right? That's what he wants. He wants us all to kill, steal, destroy, take away, have backbiting, lying, all these different negative things. And I'm not putting it, that's human nature as well. We're attracted through our fallen, sinful state. But this concept of speaking something out into the existence or the universe and getting it back, I believe that there's strong biblical proof that that's coming from a demonic force. So we could, in a veiled view of the world, say this person's getting everything they want. They're saying these things, they're doing it, they're receiving money, power, all these different things, and success from the world standpoint. But ultimately, there is the cautionary tale, and this is where you could throw me out with maybe with the bathwater, right? I could sound crazy, but biblically, the cautionary tale is that could be coming from the enemy to that person. That's they're just, and when you say this hardened heart, That is a very biblical term, where when we're going in towards sin, our heart gets hardened and we are deceived. And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, this person might not even know what's going on, which that is like a nightmare, right? Like, and that's what the Bible says is
That's what
world.
this technology does. I mean, there's nothing we've done on this call that's there's. I'm being dramatic. We don't have the opportunity to interact with our listeners. There's no culture here, with, you know, between us and our listeners.
So,
There's
so
a
I say
relationship between
invite it.
us.
Invite it, right?
Yeah,
If somebody has
we
a thought, they listen to this and they say, "Here, I comment on it," or send a message to me or you. They want to come in with all three of us or four, and let's have
well
some.
we can say that, and we can do our best to model that. But I think our culture is being programmed to not even think about that,
Understood.
because like this is, the social, like all these, the social media, the podcasting, we're we're putting who we are out to the world, and there are people that are listening that are going to give us power. They're going to, and that's a big responsibility. They're going to look at us and see us and put us in a light that's almost unattainable, and then we have to be able to live up to it, which is not attainable. And I get, it's just, we'll continue that on another. But I wrote this down about when you talked about giving credit, where it's in the, I thought, well, maybe the order matters. So it's like, here's our four scenarios. You you get credit, or I'm getting credit for something. I could accept all of it, right? No God, no accountability partner, no third party, just me. I'm accepting. Or the opposite of that totally is what you said earlier, taking no credit, like none, maybe too little even, and it all goes to God. So like I'm looking at those as like total opposites.
Mhm.
It's like me or God. It's total opposites. Or it would be God then me, or me and then God. Like, meaning if I accept it, you know what, Robert, you're right. I'm unbelievable. It's crazy how helpful I am at business. Like, insane. Like, I almost can't imagine, why am I so good? Like, well, I second guess it, right? Like, where does this come from? I'm even second guessing now as I'm trying to uh, take the compliment. Like, I'm so good that, like, I've had so much pain around being so good because of being hurt by people around me. Uh, just period, is how talented and gifted I am at what I do. So I can accept that, and then also say, man, I give, and God, God is my creator and has given me these powers. So I'm saying, or my other thought is like God gets the credit and then me. I'm not really sure how that, but these are the four scenarios that come to my mind. It's like if I accept it all and it's only me, I'm going to be arrogant. Maybe that's part of the reason so many people
So,
have had issues with me, because uh I was just almost like a wave. I mean, it really isn't helpful to people to destroy everything that's, it's like, if I tell somebody the truth and I'm so right that they haven't even figured out, they haven't even caught up to how right I am. Like, that's a painful. There's a, and depending on the media, like, it's a very shameful thing to help somebody grow. You need, shame is involved, like conscience, guilt, like the person's basically breaking down. So it's probably why I had a lot of pain, because it's just so, you know, so critical, so judging, so honest, but in the wrong medium, it's like torture for people, right? That's not living in a virtuous way. It's like there's no patience there, there's no humility, there's just arrogance and intellect. And why am I doing it? I'm doing it for too much for me and not enough for them, kind of thing. The balance is off. So those are things that came to my mind. It's like these four categories. If I take all the credit, I'm arrogant and I'm going to alienate myself from my culture. Nobody's going to want to sit with me at the lunch table. I'm just a weird kid or whatever. If it's only God, then I'm never going to actually accept anything and grow into my gifts. But then if I accept your acknowledgement and I also say there's other forces here at hand that have given me this drive and this ability and this talent and this desire to help. I'm not taking all the damn credit, but I'm taking the credit and then giving it as well. I versus or it's like, and maybe this is my blind spot because of my lack of faith. God gets a credit and then me. I'm not really sure about that one. We can unpack that in another podcast, but like the order, there's four I mean, maybe there's more than four, but that would be like only me, only God, me, then God, God, then me. What's the order? We can figure that out on the next episode of the podcast. Please end the show.
So for clarity, I believe that it's all of them in different timing, right? I'm gonna be selfish sometimes, and I'm gonna be viewing things like, oh, this is me, I've done this. Other times I'm gonna be so lack of, and it's so obviously, and I don't want to use the word painfully obvious, but it's obvious. God did that. He put it all together. He protected me. He did all these things. He's been doing them all. Other times it's this collaboration. We are if we are awesome, right? Like you're awesome, I'm pretty awesome. Like, and I can accept that. Like I see I'm different than people, right? I also have some character traits that aren't so awesome. But when I'm focusing and I'm utilizing these gifts that God has given me, it's impactful. And then so then to recognize that, and then you have this, like, oh, like, thank God for this. Like, this isn't me. I didn't create it. I did work. I showed up. It's like somebody said to me at one point, like with the company, my financial advisor, he said, God's the owner of the business. You're just the managing partner here, right? Like that's who I am. So it's even that way. So in closing of the podcast, I'm still growing and learning, right? Like it's what I said. Like I at one point I couldn't even accept the compliment. Now I'm at this point where it's like, yeah, this is this mutual thing. But I really do, when I take the time and slow down and look at how everything works together in this world, how everything comes together, all the most simplest thing I love to revert back to is that we breathe in oxygen and breathe out, whatever it is, carbon dioxide. These plants take this carbon dioxide and then they create oxygen for us to live. Like these things are like so amazing, right? I give God all the glory, right? For everything that me, putting it all together, this in this capacity, like it's all him. It always was him, and it will be him, and eventually we'll all see that we will all there biblically, we will all come before him and we will see that. I just pray that as many people that would come into in front of him in relationship with him, and they hear, you've done well, good and faithful servant, come with me, versus you were not, you didn't help, you didn't feed the hungry, you didn't clothe the naked, you didn't visit those in jail, you didn't take care of the orphans. And it's not actions, right? But in his name, in Jesus's name, you didn't have that relationship, that faith through him, and you're separated for eternity. That's terrible, right? Like, but everybody will know that biblically it says every knee will bow and every tongue will confess Jesus as Lord. So, but what camp what camp will we be in, right, is the question. And for me, it's very important. I want to be in the well done, good and faithful servant. And even with that, then it comes down to like, all right, what am I doing every day? Because there's so much biblical text that says like your good deeds are terrible, right? They're going to be thrown out and burned up. Like they were actually for you, meaning me, not for God. And then others will be revealed, and they go through a testing of fire, and then it's going to be revealed what went on in this world in honoring of God. So running a business and doing these things, it is a challenge to navigate these things in a spiritual worldview. But there's things in the Bible that clearly say that we can do it. It's not like that's wrong or not right, and it's actually to much is given, much is expected. So that being said, that's my closing monologue.
Everyone listening to this, please share this episode to someone that you think would benefit. Please leave a review on the Culture Matters podcast. We will see you next time.